Zella here again for Small Business Digest, and we have with us today a guest I'm really looking forward to, Mike Stickler. Not going to say anything else, but welcome him to the program, and say hello. Are you still in Mexico, or are you back?
I am still in Mexico. I'm down in Playa del Carmen, about right at this moment, about 65 feet from the beach. And
Oh,
so I'm sorry for all of you guys. I truly am up there in North America, but I'm enjoying my time here. That's for sure.
okay. Well, on that note, making us all jealous, Mike, first tell us a little bit about your personal background. Then tell us about your company, which I really want to learn about a lot about, and finally a website.
Okay. So I go by the pen name Michael Stickler. I'm an author. I've authored 19 books in my 22-year career as an author. I've been a consultant and I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. In fact, most of my background or my education is in agriculture. And I found that I could make a better living as an entrepreneur than I could as being a guy in agriculture. And so I made a trade back over into being an entrepreneur early in my life, in my 20s. I've had some companies, I've sold some companies, I've lost some companies. I've had kind of quite a life of up and down. And in 2000, I started writing as an author. And I've had 4 best-selling books of those 19. I often kind of jokingly say I talk about my bestsellers more than the other books because I'm kind of embarrassed about those other books. And
Well, stop a moment. What were the titles?
I wrote, well, the first book I wrote, the bestseller I wrote, was a book called Journey to Generosity. It was a little Christian devotional that sold 300,000 copies. Then I wrote another book called Life Without Reservation, which was a Christian living book. And then my third book was about a man in Southern Nevada, which many of you guys might remember. His name was Cliven Bundy. He was a guy that the news all carried that he had an armed standoff with the federal government over his cows. And I met the man and I just was fascinated with his story. So I wrote that book, and that really sold well. And then my third book, which just came out this last December, is my first fiction book called Ghost Patriot. And it kind of follows along the line of the news, kind of in a Tom Clancy style. And I say that very humbly because Tom Clancy was quite the author. And so I started writing, and I find, I'm kind of an odd guy to be an author with the kind of background I have, science and agriculture and whatnot. But I found that I was a pretty good storyteller. And as a good storyteller, I was able to translate that storytelling into writing and make some pretty successful books out of it. And so I love to write. And then the launching of Leadership Books back in 2013 was really, and that's our publishing company, was really out of a necessity to get my books not just published, but sold. And so I just wasn't happy with the way my publisher was handling my products, specifically that first book that I mentioned, Journey to Generosity. And so I wrestled it away from them. I literally had to buy the rights to my own book back from the publisher. And then I proceeded to sit down with my writing coach, Art Ritter, and we looked at how do we publish this book and do it well. So we took a deep dive into publishing, and we took a deep dive in how the market's acting and who's buying books and where are they buying books and how are they buying books, and out of doing some testing and some, making some money, losing some money, we ultimately launched what's called Leadership Books now, which is a book publishing firm that publishes nonfiction leadership style books in the area of business, finance, thought leadership, and faith. And we have about 2,000 books on our website right now, about 2,200 actually, representing roughly 900 authors. And we've really kind of tapped into a way to selling books and selling them very aggressively. And more importantly, connecting the reader to the author. And so because we focus on nonfiction books, most of all of those men or women have a larger business model. They're consultants, or they're public speakers, or they have a mastermind class or something like that. And so we have developed a methodology to connect the reader directly to the author to connect with their larger business model. And that's really worked out great. I mean, so we're much more than just publishing books. We're publishing books and then helping those readers become connected, all with the idea, Dawn, that if you're a consultant and the person you're talking to has read your book, it's a whole nother kind of conversation, okay, than it is trying to start from the top. Hi, I'm a consultant and this is what I do. And because when they've read your book, they're already convinced you have what they want if they're having a conversation with you. So it becomes a much easier connection for them, to connect with you for business. Whether that, like I said, whether that's consulting or a mastermind course, an online course, hiring you as a speaker, whatever that looks like.
And your website?
My website is leadershipbooks.com. It's leadershipbooks, LEADERSHIP books, BOOKS.com. And there you can find all kinds of information. We have live events, we have a podcast, we have books for sale, of course. We have where you can click to find out about publishing. We also have done a pretty interesting thing that we call book and author representation. So we kept getting people coming to us that were already authors, published through another publishing firm or self-published, and they weren't getting any traction on their book. They just couldn't sell very many of them. They were frustrated with it. And so we do a thing called book representation. Well, we'll take those books on like an agent does and rep that book around the world. We take them all to all our shows and all around the world. I'm repping that book and selling that book and getting the traction it deserves. And so even if you're a published author already, we can help you find a way to get a lot more connection going on for your book to your business model.
Well, let me ask you a question. If an author has a book out for 2 years, do you create a second edition for him or her, or if they're interested in getting you to represent them?
We can do one or either or both. So meaning we can do a second edition. A lot of times the reason a book's not selling well is the content is good, but it's not great. All right. And so sometimes the second edition is warranted because the content needs to be reworked and it needs to be tuned. And I don't mean just editing. I mean storytelling and connecting to the audience to make it to where people won't stop turning the page. So sometimes a book needs a second edition, a rewrite, and then other times it's just straight representation where the book is in good shape, it just needs the exposure it deserves. And so it just depends. And often, honestly, the author is so close to it that they can't see whether it needs a rework or not. You know, there's so much emotional attachment to it. They're not sure whether they can, should do that or not. So it just depends on the author. But we work real hard at delivering super content, what we like to say, life-changing content, and getting it read so that people will act upon it.
Well, I'll tell you when we get off this program, we got to talk about, we have a book at our company, 3 Oxbridge, which is a terrific book, but has very little uh, traction. So we're going to uh, talk to you offline. But the point is, you don't take you still leave it with the original publisher. You just market it for the author.
Yeah, through the book representation model, we go ahead and just market it around the world. And when I say that, we have a very distinct methodology that we do. We do intent marketing first, and then we do a lot of retargeting. We also take the book, as I mentioned, we take it to shows. I just came back from the London Book Fair. In 2 more weeks, I will be down in Orlando at the Podfest Expo, where 3,000 Podfest or pod hosts, podcasting hosts will be, which is just a right place to get traction and interest in your book. We go to the National Speakers Association. We go to we go to Book Expo. Obviously, Book Expo wasn't this year because of COVID, but next year it will be. We go to everything to get your book the kind of traction and attention. As an example, when we were in London, we had people coming to us from India, Europe, the Orient, all wanting to gobble up some of these nonfiction books, which are very popular in outside of the U.S., but very few authors write in nonfiction work outside of the U.S. And so we have lots of people coming to us asking us, for agreements for rights or distribution agreements or whatnot to take the books on an international scale. And again, we represent you there, so we're very slow at that. We have to make sure it can be distributed and delivered, and how there's a lot of tricks, a lot of snafus in an international setting. So you got to be real careful how you go forward, but and looking for the right partners. But it's pretty exciting how it goes, and people love it. It's also amazing how I'm kind of drilling in here, but in the international setting, people really want American books on business. They really want them. They don't care that much about European books on business. They want American books on business, and so they're pretty interested in that.
Okay, let's back up a minute. I own a consulting company for widgets, and
Okay.
I think I want to write a book, and I write it how to produce widgets economically. I come to you, and do you become the publisher, or do you prefer that I self-publish?
No, if you came to me or came to us and said, look, I have this idea of a book that how to produce widgets economically, I would say the first thing I would tell you, Don, and I know you're just doing this off the cuff, but the first thing I'd say to you is, well, that's boring. We have to come up with something that's much more important, that says the same thing and tells a story about it. But so we would work with you on your content. As your publisher, we would work with you on your content and the development of the book. And there's multiple ways to do that. Sometimes we do it with a ghostwriter, but typically we take the time to develop and nurture, or I like to use the word shepherd, the author into being a great writer. And as we do that, then the book goes through multiple edits and it gets ready for publishing. From there, we take the book and run with it. We take it all over the world. We have a 4-year rollout period where we do first hardcover books, then we do soft cover books, then we do an ebook, then we do an audio book if the book is warranted. That way we have 4 different rollouts over a 4-year period of that book. Most people are thinking, that, a traditional publishing model is they do all 4 formats and then just shoot it up into the sky and hope somebody buys it. We don't do that. What we do is we roll out and build your business over time. There's only a certain number of people that will pay $35 for a hardcover book. And then there's only a certain number of people that are going to buy a paperback book. And then by the time you get to an ebook, it's really kind of the bargain basement crowd. Those people are voracious readers and they're looking for discounts and inexpensive ways to buy books. And then the audiobooks are a whole nother group of people who are listening to books Probably not readers, but more likely people who have minimal amount of time on their hands. So they listen to the book while they're driving or on their commute, or maybe on vacation, they'll listen to the book, something like that. So those are all different markets, and those are all different audiences. And people, most people who are publishing their books don't differentiate any of them, but they're certainly different. And then another thing to understand is about 55% of the people who buy a book never read it all the way to the end. So there's a bunch of reasons why. Well, sometimes it's because the book is boring and they don't go any further. Sometimes it's because the book it gets better over time, but you have to put in, the investment. A lot of people don't have the patience for that. Sometimes it's just interruptions, and I was talking to a guy the other day. He says, I got 5 books going. Yours will be the 6th. And I'm kind of like, well, okay. Some guys are reading 5 or 6 books. So one of the things that we do is we work through emails and whatnot to nurture those readers to put their attention back on your book, to keep moving on reading your book. And of course, great content is what really carries it. When people open the book and they're captured by the first page, second page, first chapter, second chapter, they just keep turning. They can't wait to get back to it. That's what really drives a book to get read all the way through. And let's face it, if you're doing a book on widgets and how to produce good widgets, you better captivate the audience to get them to read it.
I only use that as the example.
Sure.
But let's back up. Okay, I come to you, and we said let's do the book, and you said we're going to take it on. What is the financial arrangement that's made?
Well, so first off, the first thing we do is evaluate the book and you as the author, your writing quality and style. Meaning, do you have the skill set to really write it the way it needs to be written? So, and to be frank with you, we look at all manuscripts. We'll take all manuscripts in, but very few of them pass that first step because the book isn't really ready. So there's a couple ways to do that. You can go out and find a coach that will take you to through that, or you can use one of our executive editors who will work with you for the next 8 months to a year to get that book ready to go. Then with us, it's kind of interesting. With us, when we take a book on to publish, you get 3 contracts, or 2 contracts for sure from us, sometimes 3. And one's a royalty agreement. Now, the national average of royalties paid to an author is under 5%. We pay 15. 10 to, I should qualify that, 10 to 15%, depending on the genre. Then you get another contract with us that allows us to represent you as a speaker and as a consultant. It's a non-exclusive agreement, but it lets us talk to a vendor who says, I'm interested in hiring Don as a keynote speaker, or I'm interested in having him come in and do some consulting with my business. That allows us the rights to do that. And again, I want to drive that point home. It's non-exclusive. So if Don goes and gets a speaking engagement outside of our arrangements, then that's fine. No harm, no foul. It's only the ones that we're bringing to you. And then the third contract that some authors get and some don't is what we call a publisher's services agreement, which allows us, as I mentioned at the beginning of your question, you can go out and find a coach that will get you to where you need to go, or you can use one of our coaches. And if you use one of our coaches, there's a fee involved in that. It's completely okay with us to go either way, but the only thing I guarantee you is if you use one of our coaches, we'll get you there. We will get you there. I can't promise you that the other guy will get you there. Yeah, and that's, or gal, I shouldn't say guy only. Most editors are women today, but either one.
Okay. Well, your website again for our audience before we go any further?
Sure. It's leadershipbooks.com. Leadershipbooks.com is spelled LEADERSHIP books, BOOKS.com.
Okay. You mentioned that you also do religious or that's another. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we publish Christian leadership
Sure.
books and we represent Christian leadership books. And we primarily do for one main reason. Christian churches, especially in North America, are outside of the military, in my opinion, are more involved in developing leadership than any other group. Outside of the military, now, hands down, the military has a much more refined training for leadership, but the Christian church is very involved in leadership and training leaders and equipping leaders. And so some of the greatest thought leadership in leadership comes out of the church. And so I just think it's a shame not to share some of those ideas. I mean, think about it. You know, some of these pastors or ministry leaders, they're representing, 3 to 30,000 people. And they have, sometimes they have, hundreds of staff. They have to provide leadership to all of those people. And so they're very sophisticated at it. And a lot of people just don't understand that. They're just very sophisticated at leadership and developing leadership, mentoring leadership. And they have organizations that have ongoing leadership courses and all kinds of things. Pretty sophisticated how they do it. And I don't see that anywhere else other than the military.
So you offer books for in that genre? Who
We do.
writes those books?
So most of those are people that are in the church realm or ministry realm that are leaders, and we only publish leadership style books. So if it's a fiction book or it's a how to make your marriage better book or something like that, that's not something that we publish. We publish in the area of how to lead men and women in an organizational setting.
Fascinating. No, one of my closest friends happens to be the former head of the Lutheran Church in America, and he is definitely a leader.
Right.
You know, you're right. And I had never even thought about it. He now teaches at Yale Divinity.
Yeah, most people don't understand, most people just kind of just put aside for a minute, if you can, what your religious beliefs are, and just look at the structure of leadership training they do. And it's pretty fascinating. And honestly, at the scale and at the intensity that they do it, I don't see anybody else doing it, again, outside of the military. The military, they have the academies and the war college and ongoing training. And I mean, they're very, much more sophisticated than the churches, but most corporations don't have, even the biggest ones don't have that solid of a leadership program. They'll bring consultants in from time to time, but they're not really about developing leaders. They're really about developing whatever they're selling.
Or developing the people they want to mentor. We
Right.
have just a few minutes left. First off, your website again for our audience.
It's leadershipbooks.com, leadershipbooks.com, LEADERSHIP books, BOOKS.com.
Okay. So what would you like to leave our audience with, and how do they get to learn more besides the website?
So if you go to, I'll answer the second question first. If you go to our website and you click on Are You an Author tab, it's going to take you to some explanations. But I'm going to speak now. I'm going to take my publisher hat off and I'm going to put my author hat on for a minute. Being an author is a wonderful, wonderful career. I love writing. I have a great passion in it. So if you're going to go and write a book, put some passion into it. Don't just say I'm going to do this. Put some passion into it. Secondly, if you're going to be an author and write a nonfiction book, determine inside of yourself that it's going to be the best book you can write, and you're only going to settle for a book that's going to change lives. If you start out with those three things, you're pointed in the right direction. If you have any other motive, like I'm going to sell the book and make $1 million, I'm using it as my fat business card only to show people my bona fides, I don't care if they read it or not, then don't bother wasting everybody's time writing a book. Just go be a good marketer. But if you want to be an author, be an author and pour out. Book writing, book publishing, book authorship is still the best way to long form express competitive ideas to the market. It's the best way to do it. And you want to be able to compete against all the other guys and gals who are presenting great ideas on the market.
That's a
That's
great
my
point.
tip.
That's a great way to end this session together. Mike, we thank you so much for a really interesting time. Thank you.